Sequels to great games are tricky to get right. Players start having high expectations and expect them to be met, and developers become more ambitious and start to have dilemmas on what should change and what should stay the same. Not to mention there's the issue that when you change a little thing, you change a lot of things. A sequel could end up feeling totally different from its predecessor with just a few tweaks, and this could either make or break the experience. This game is actually a shining example of what can be achieved when the tweaks are done correctly. Doom 1 walked so that Doom 2 could run. For a game this ancient in today's gaming landscape, Doom 2 is still one of the greatest and most satisfying sequels I've had the pleasure of experiencing. And here's why. Doom 2 picks up straight after Doom 1, with Doom Guy leaving Hell through a portal that takes him back to Earth, which quite literally has gone to Hell, or rather the other way around, Hell has found Earth. Civilization as we know it has collapsed, and it is up to our protagonist, the Doom Guy, the deadliest space marine, with a temper hotter than every hell he finds himself in combined, to wipe out every last demon on Earth and send them back to where they belong, and then go to where they belong and then tear them a new one so big they're gonna need a sewing machine the size of a shopping mall to stitch it back together, and then send them into the cosmic oblivion with a finishing uppercut so deadly it would make a fatality in Mortal Kombat look like a jolly ending of a Saturday morning cartoon. Because killing the demons once just isn't enough. He's just that angry. In his defense, they did kill his pet rabbit, so they kinda had it coming. He's got a point. Two, actually, if you count the receiving end of his shotgun barrel. I mean, he's probably done worse for less. With those biceps coming out of his biceps and all that anger, Doom Guy is probably the kind of person who, if a fellow space marine even looked at him the wrong way for taking the last protein bar from the space station's vending machine, he'd put him in the vending machine. And that's on a good day. But anyway, jokes aside, that's pretty much all there is to the premise. There's a surprising amount of lore if you look for it, but in a nutshell, it's all about a big dude with big guns and even bigger biceps. And he's about to rip and tear, shoot and shatter, smash, demolish, and pulverize anything standing between him and his goal to rebuild a world that is free of demonic clutches. From a gameplay standpoint, Doom 2 controls and plays exactly like Doom 1. It's even got the same shoot demons and grab the colored keycards to beat the level gameplay loop, but the overall feeling is surprisingly different. This is where the notion of when you change one little thing, you change a lot of things comes into play. So what little changes does Doom 2 exactly make? There are two small but key differences here. The first one is the enemy count and variety, and the second key difference is that now you have one new weapon added to your arsenal. Enter the Super Shotgun, a shotgun that gives you more shotgun per shotgun than the shotgun. Double the barrels, 3 times the kick, 10 times as much carnage, and 1,000,000 times more fun than every other gun. Hail to the king, baby. Or rather, hell to the king? No? Okay then, I'll see myself out. The Super Shotgun is the perfect complementary weapon for the increase in enemies on screen at any given time. It's got a wider spread, does approximately triple the damage of the standard pump-action shotgun, and it is the perfect crowd control device. This is easily the best simple addition to the overall formula. It is so fun to use that it almost renders the previous shotgun entirely useless, if not for the game's impeccable way of balancing weapons. The Super Shotgun has 3 drawbacks that make it inferior to the standard shotgun in certain situations. Every shot consumes 2 shells instead of just 1, and the damage drops off significantly at medium to long range. It also has a slower firing rate, with each shot resulting in a reloading animation that is oddly satisfying to watch to no end, that it feels like more than a fair enough trade-off. This allows for the standard pump-action shotgun to complement the Super Shotgun by providing firepower at a distance with the added bonus of conserving ammo and being equally effective at any given distance, even if the pump-action is technically the weaker brother 100% of the time. It's a pretty unusual way of balancing shotguns in comparison to the vast majority of games that I've played. Most shotguns usually tend to differ in aesthetic, firepower, capacity, spread, or fire rate. Range is usually never part of the equation. It's a really interesting balance, and it's good that id Software did it this way, or else the standard shotgun would have just become as irrelevant as the handgun already is. Pfft, that's it? That's why you call it an amazing sequel? And I hear you, person who hasn't played Doom 2 in the back. That's a good question. And no, that's not the only thing that's new to the game. As the saying goes, a hero, or in this case an anti-hero, is only as good as his villains. And it's safe to say that the quality of the villains in Doom 2 is a huge improvement. Most of the threats from Doom 1 are now basically cannon fodder at this point, paving the way for more interesting enemy types such as the Hell Knight, which is basically a weaker version of the Baron of Hell, the giant blob of flesh with rocket launchers for arms known as the Mancubus, or Mancubi in plural, and the Revenant, which basically looks like a taller imp that shoots homing missiles at you, and then there's the Pain Elemental, which I find to be aptly named because it's an absolute pain in the elemental rear. They are tougher than Caco demons and they spawn more lost souls. And since we're talking about annoying enemies, there's also a new type of zombie called the Chain Gunner, who has a ridiculous accuracy and can drain your health in just a matter of seconds if you don't deal with him first. And last but not least, there's also the Archvile, a super tall demon that has pyromancy and necromancy stats maxed out. Also has an insanely large health pool. I don't necessarily find the Archviles that annoying, but they are always a priority to deal with whenever they are present. The bosses overall are way more awesome this time, especially the final boss. The Icon of Sin fight is leagues better than the final fight from Doom 1, at least in my opinion. The layout of the arena is simultaneously simple and well thought out. There's a lot of verticality, it requires a totally different strategy to win. All the enemies that used to be boss fights are now nothing but an inconvenience because you are swimming in BFG ammo, and the battle that unfolds feels satisfyingly climactic. It is an excellent display of how far the Doom guy has come since the start of the first Doom game. As usual, there's not much actual story going on in the Doom games aside from the lore, but the enemy progression in and of itself acts as a sort of a character development plot device for the Doom guy, and weirdly creates a sense of character arc progression without any exposition or dialogue whatsoever. All of these gameplay mechanics and new features come together so nicely and spectacularly reflect the design philosophy that a sequel should strive to be: bigger and better. And that's exactly what Doom 2 is. However, as wonderful of a sequel as Doom 2 is, it's not perfect. It doesn't have any egregious issues, at least none that I've experienced, but it still retains some of the problems of the first Doom game. The first gripe that I will get out of the way is that the amount of lag that occurs during weapon swapping is atrocious. I'm not sure if this problem is exclusive to these new ports, or that perhaps this problem has been there since the beginning, and maybe changing the speed of the weapon swaps would have messed up the flow of the gameplay, or even something in the source code, but what do I know? All I know is that I found it problematic. It's either that or Doom Eternal has simply ruined weapon swapping for me. Thanks a lot, Doom Eternal. Something else that hasn't changed from the predecessor is the dip in quality when it comes to the level design. Now, for some context for those of you who haven't watched my Doom 1 review yet, which reminds me, shameless plug, you should totally check it out. Doom 1 offers 4 episodes that separate the game into portions of approximately 8 levels each. Doom 2 instead offers a continuous collection of approximately 30 levels that span across 3 different locations. The first third of the game taking place on yet another space station, then the second third happens on Earth, and finally the last third taking place in either Hell or a hellish version of Earth. Frankly, I'm not so sure, and if anyone knows the answer, feel free to let me know in the comment section. For some weird reason, it feels as if the dip in quality is practically identical in both games. The first location starts out with a bang, the levels are incredibly well paced and they don't seem to drag, the maps are superbly laid out, with enemies having interesting spawn points, and the difficulty feels just right, especially having just come off of Doom 1. It felt right at home. Both the enemy types and the weapons you gain access to feel like they are being thrown to the player at a good pace, and the difficulty gained momentum accordingly. Both games start off on an insanely good note and then suffer a significant dip in quality by the second setting you visit. Okay, that was a lot of S sounds. She sells seashells by the seashore. Man, I'm on fire today. In Doom 2, this dip in level design quality seems to be even more severe. It doesn't become a bad game by any means, but these new levels feel bland and uninspired in comparison, and the whole experience just takes somewhat of a nosedive in the second act. Thankfully, the gameplay loops and systems of the classic Doom games are so incredible that they even can carry these levels. That, and the fact that these games are still popular to this day, is a testament of just how good Doom 1 and 2 have always been. Also similar to the first game in my experience, Doom 2 gains back that lost momentum as it races to the finish line, culminating into an epic confrontation that, at the time, frustrated the crap out of me, but an epic confrontation nonetheless. I found it somewhat troublesome to place the final shots to the icon of sin, but there are two things that I can appreciate about this fight. The first one is that it wasn't heavy-handed about what the solution is, which, having grown up with games from the 90s such as the core design Tomb Raider games and the old-school Resident Evil games, I'd say Doom 2 being vague with its final boss is absolutely on brand with the time that it came out. Balancing what not to tell the player and what to tell the player is a hard thing to get right, but if the scales have to tip on one side, on some occasions it is best to lean on not telling the player. I don't always agree when games do this, but it is nice to know when a game studio respects you enough to let you come to the solution on your own. One other thing I appreciate about the boss fight is its influence and legacy that has carried over to Doom Eternal, which is somewhat of a reboot or a retreading of the same story. Whenever you see a franchise come such a long way, it's just incredible, even if you are introduced to it much later on in its lifespan. So anyway, to wrap things up, Doom 2 is, and I don't care if this is a terrible pun, it is one hell of a sequel. By the time this video is up, you'll be watching it in 2022, but I just beat this game at the end of last year, and I can say Doom 2 is unironically one of the best and most fun games that I've beaten in 2021. And if I'd get a chance to beat it again this year, I would, and so should you. If you've never played Doom 2 before, I seriously recommend this game. You can find this game on almost any console. At this point, you can probably even find it on a microwave or a toaster. And if for some reason all else fails, I believe you can even find it within Doom Eternal inside the Fortress of Doom. But do be warned, Doom Eternal is such an amazing game that Doom 2 will feel underwhelming and antiquated in juxtaposition. But that's not to say that Doom 2 isn't any good, on the contrary, it's simply that somehow the franchise has found a way to outdo itself even decades later on. If the new Doom games have sparked an interest to discover more boomer shooter type of games, you seriously cannot go wrong with Doom 2. It is a blast. But if you do, just take my advice, always save your game. You'll thank me later. Now, opinions on the first two Doom games might vary a bit, but if I had to only recommend one game of the two, my answer would be Doom 2. It is practically Doom 1, but bigger, better, and more badass. The super shotgun alone makes my decision a super easy one. So check out Doom 2, and while you're at it, consider checking out my Doom 1 review, or some of my other stuff like the Resident Evil video essays if that's your thing. I plan to do a lot more videos in this second year of the channel, so stick around. And with that, the Raven draws to a conclusion. Thank you so much for watching, I wish you all a wonderful 2022, and I'll see you next time.